As the years passed, the legend of Nurse Evelyn continued to grow, and with it, the haunting of the old hospital. The building's decaying walls seemed to hold the memories of countless lives, both lived and lost, and many who ventured near the hospital reported strange occurrences that could not be explained by logic or science. It became known as one of the most haunted places in town, a place that drew both curious souls and those searching for a brush with the paranormal. The ghost of Nurse Evelyn wasn't just a figure of local lore anymore. She became a symbol of unresolved grief and the consequences of untold stories. People from near and far visited the town, hoping to see for themselves if the ghost stories were true, but most never made it past the front gate of the hospital. Some say that the closer one gets to the building, the more the oppressive air of sadness and loss takes hold. Others report a heavy silence that settles over everything, as though the land itself is holding its breath. There were those who tried to document the hauntings, setting up cameras and recording equipment in the hope of capturing evidence of Nurse Evelyn's restless spirit. On one such occasion, a group of paranormal investigators came to the town. Armed with sophisticated equipment, they entered the hospital in search of proof. The night was still, and the usual sounds of crickets and distant cars were muted, as if the entire world was holding its breath along with the building. The investigators split into small teams, one of which ventured down to the hospital's basement, where the fire that claimed Nurse Evelyn's life had started. They reported hearing faint footsteps echoing in the empty space, footsteps that seemed to approach them but then stop suddenly. A chill filled the air, and the temperature dropped by several degrees. It was as if a presence was right there with them, hovering just beyond their reach, and yet the room remained empty. Upstairs, another team focused on the long hallway where Tom had encountered Nurse Evelyn years before. They set up motion detectors, infrared cameras, and audio recorders. As they waited, the air in the hallway grew thick, and the team's equipment began to malfunction. The motion detectors went off unexpectedly, triggering alarms when no one was near them. One of the investigators, standing just outside a room at the end of the corridor, felt a cold hand brush against his shoulder. When he turned around, no one was there. The only thing he could hear was the faint sound of a woman's voice, whispering something unintelligible, but it was enough to send him running out of the hallway in fear. The footage they captured that night was chilling. In the dim light, the shadowy figure of a woman could be seen gliding silently across the floor, her form faint but unmistakable. The camera's focus shifted to the nurse's face, pale and sorrowful, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare into the souls of those who dared to watch. The investigators were shaken, but they did not want to jump to conclusions. After all, they had come looking for proof, and they had found it, yet it wasn't the proof they had anticipated. The investigators left the hospital in the early hours of the morning, but they left with a sense of unease that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. They could not deny the presence. They had encountered an overwhelming force, filled with sadness and an undeniable yearning. What had started as a routine investigation had turned into a confrontation with something far deeper than they had expected. The recordings and photographs they took that night were widely shared online, and soon the legend of Nurse Evelyn spread even further. People came in droves, trying to experience what the investigators had witnessed for themselves, but many left disappointed, too terrified to stay long enough to capture anything. Those brave enough to enter would often leave with a haunted expression, speaking little about their experience, as though words were insufficient to describe what they had encountered. Among the many who came to the old hospital was Claire, a woman who had grown up hearing stories of the ghost of Nurse Evelyn. Claire had always been fascinated by the supernatural, and the haunting of the hospital intrigued her more than anything. As a child, she had played near the hospital's gates, daring herself to step closer each time she passed. Her curiosity grew with age, and eventually she found herself standing at the entrance to the hospital, just like so many before her. However, Claire wasn't just there for the thrill of it. She had a personal connection to the hospital's past. Her grandmother had worked at the hospital in the 1930s and had often spoken of Nurse Evelyn. Claire's grandmother had never mentioned the fire or the tragic death, but she often spoke of Evelyn in hushed tones, as if the nurse had been someone too important to forget. This sense of connection to the past, Claire entered the hospital alone one evening, determined to uncover the truth about Nurse Evelyn and what had truly happened that fateful night. As she wandered through the silent halls, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the history pressing down on her. Every step she took seemed to be measured by the echoes of the past, and the stillness of the building felt alive with memory. Her flashlight flickered as she ventured down the dark corridors. The air was thick with dust, and the stale smell of old paper and mildew filled her nostrils. She passed the rooms where patients had once been cared for, but now they were nothing more than hollow shells, their walls peeling and cracked. The memories of the lives that had passed through these doors seemed to hang in the air, refusing to let go. It was in the hallway near the old nurses' station that Claire first encountered the presence. At first, it was subtle, a shift in the air, a sudden drop in temperature, but soon, the air around her felt suffocating, as though something was watching. And then she saw it, the figure of a woman, standing at the far end of the hallway. The woman was dressed in an old-fashioned nurse's uniform, but Claire immediately felt that this was no ordinary apparition. The woman's face was pale and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to see through Claire rather than at her. The woman didn't move, but her presence was undeniable. The sorrow in her eyes was so overwhelming that Claire felt tears welling up in her own eyes. For a moment, the two stood in silence, as though they were connected by something deeper than time. The ghost's gaze was filled with grief, but also a deep sense of longing. Claire could feel the weight of the woman's unspoken words, as though the ghost was trying to communicate something, but the words never came. In that instant, Claire realized the truth. Nurse Evelyn was not haunting the hospital out of malice or anger. She was trapped, bound by the trauma of her untimely death and the lives she couldn't save. She was a soul in torment, forever tethered to the place where her life had ended in a blaze of fire and sorrow. Just as quickly as the ghost appeared, she vanished, leaving Claire standing alone in the dark hallway. The temperature returned to normal, and the oppressive weight lifted, but Claire knew that she had encountered something far beyond her understanding. The experience stayed with her long after she left the hospital that night, leaving her with a sense of compassion and sympathy for the spirit who had once been so full of life. For Claire, and for many others, the ghost of Nurse Evelyn is no longer just a story or a legend. She is a reminder of the tragedies that linger in the forgotten corners of the world, waiting to be remembered. As for the old hospital, its crumbling walls may one day fall completely, but Nurse Evelyn's spirit will remain, forever bound to the place she loved and lost. So, the next time you find yourself near the old hospital, take a moment to listen. If the wind is still, and the night is quiet, you might just hear the faint sound of footsteps, or a whisper on the breeze. And if you're lucky or unlucky enough, you might even catch a glimpse of Nurse Evelyn, still wandering the halls, forever searching for peace. If you've been captivated by the haunting story of Nurse Evelyn and her eternal sorrow, stay tuned for the next episode where we dive even deeper into the mysteries of the old hospital. But before you go, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss a chilling tale. Share your thoughts below. Have you ever encountered a spirit like Nurse Evelyn? Stay safe. And remember, some legends are more than just stories. Until next time, beware of what lingers in the shadows.